The marriage happened at 9 in the morning on a Tuesday in March, with no one in attendance except the Justice of the Peace and his wife, who served as witness because the law required it. The groom was a man named Caleb Ward, 47 years old, and big enough that he had to duck through doorways, with a face that looked like it had been carved from the same granite as the mountains behind his ranch. The bride was a woman named Iris Bellamy, 39 years old and heavy-set in the way that made the justice's wife whisper something to her husband when she thought no one was listening. Caleb signed the marriage certificate with handwriting so careful it looked like a child's. Iris signed beneath his name with a signature that was quick and sure and practiced. The justice said, "You may kiss your bride." Caleb looked at Iris. Iris looked at Caleb. Neither of them moved. The justice cleared his throat and said, "Or not. You are legally married either way." Caleb paid the man $5. They walked out of the courthouse into the cold March wind, and Caleb said, "We leave now. It is a 3-hour ride to the ranch. Can you ride?" Iris said, "Yes." That was the longest conversation they had all morning. If you have ever agreed to something out of necessity and then wondered what you have just done, you understand the silence between these two people right now. This is the story of a man who married a stranger because the bank said he needed a wife to keep his ranch, and a woman who married a stranger because she needed a roof over her head, and what happened the first morning she made him breakfast. If stories like this remind you that love is not always the beginning of a marriage, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story can reach. Because what Caleb Ward did not know, riding in silence beside a woman he had known for exactly 8 days, was that the first breakfast she made would crack open something in him he thought had died 3 years ago, and he would never be the same. Iris had answered Caleb's advertisement in the Cheyenne newspaper in February of 1896. The advertisement had been blunt to the point of brutality. Widower, 47, needs wife immediately for legal purposes. Must be of sound mind and able to manage household. No romance. No expectations beyond basic domestic duties. Room and board provided. Reply by letter to Caleb Ward, Bear Creek Ridge, Wyoming Territory. Most women would have thrown the paper away. Iris read it 3 times. She was living in a boarding house in Cheyenne, working as a seamstress for wages so low she could barely afford the room. She was 39 years old. She had never married because no man had ever asked. She was too large, too plain, too old, and too practical for the kind of men who married for love. She had accepted this a long time ago, but she had not accepted the idea of growing old in a rented room, sewing other women's dresses until her eyes gave out and her fingers stopped working. So she wrote a letter. She told Caleb Ward that she was 39, unmarried, healthy, capable of all household duties, and understood that this was a business arrangement. She did not mention that she was heavy. She did not mention that she had no family and no prospects. She sent the letter and waited. His reply came 8 days later. Arrive in Bear Creek Ridge by March 10th. Bring winter clothes. We marry immediately. Payment for stage fare will be waiting at the depot. Iris arrived on March 9th. Caleb met her at the stage depot the next morning. He looked at her for approximately 3 seconds, nodded once, and said, "You are Iris Bellamy?" She said, "Yes." He said, "I am Caleb Ward. We marry today. The ranch is 3 hours north. I need a wife on paper because the bank says I cannot keep the land without one. My first wife died 3 years ago. I have no interest in replacing her. I need someone to keep the house and cook meals. That is all. Do you understand?" Iris said, "Yes." He said, "Do you have questions?" She said, "No." He said, "Good. The Justice of the Peace opens at 9. They married. They rode north in silence. Caleb drove the wagon with his eyes on the road, and Iris sat beside him with her carpetbag at her feet and her hands folded in her lap, trying to understand what her life had just become. The ranch appeared as they crested a ridge, a house, a barn, a cluster of outbuildings, and land that stretched to the base of the mountains. It was bigger than Iris had expected, more solid, more real. Caleb stopped the wagon in front of the house and said, "This is it. Your room is upstairs, second door on the right. Mine is the first door. Do not go in my room. I do not go in yours. Meals at sunrise, noon, and sundown. I work from dawn until dark. The kitchen is stocked. The root cellar is behind the house. Firewood is stacked on the north side. Do what needs doing. Do not ask me for help unless it is an emergency." Then he carried her bag inside, set it on the floor at the base of the stairs, and walked out. Iris stood in the empty house and listened to the sound of his boots crossing the yard toward the barn. Then she picked up her bag and climbed the stairs. Her room was small and clean, with a narrow bed, a chair, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the land to the east. There was a quilt on the bed, handmade, old, faded in places where the sun had touched it. Iris set down her bag and sat on the edge of the bed. The quilt smelled like cedar and dust. She thought about the woman who had made it, the first wife, the one Caleb had no interest in replacing. Iris wondered what she had been like. She wondered how she had died. She wondered if Caleb had loved her. And then she stopped wondering because it did not matter. That woman was dead. Iris was here, and she had work to do. She unpacked her bag. She changed into a work dress. She went downstairs and assessed the house. It was clean enough. Caleb clearly knew how to keep things from falling into total disrepair. But it had the hollow quality of a place where no one really lived, only existed. There were no curtains, no rugs, no decoration of any kind. The kitchen had a stove, a work table, a dry sink, shelves lined with basic supplies. The root cellar had potatoes, onions, carrots, turnips, a barrel of apples going soft. There was salt pork in brine, dried beans, flour, cornmeal, lard, and a jar of something that might have been preserves but was too old to trust. Iris made a list in her head of what she would need from town. Then she started supper. Caleb came in at dusk. Iris had set the table, tin plates, forks, cups, and laid out fried salt pork, beans, cornbread, and boiled potatoes. It was plain food, basic, the kind of meal a man alone would make for himself. Caleb looked at the table. He looked at Iris. He sat down without speaking and ate. When he finished, he stood, said, "Thank you for the meal," and walked upstairs. Iris heard his door close. She washed the dishes in silence and went to her own room. That was the first day. The second day was the same. Caleb left before dawn. Iris made breakfast and left it warming on the stove, but he was already gone. She spent the day cleaning the house from top to bottom, scrubbing floors, washing windows, beating dust from the curtains that did not exist. She found cobwebs in the corners, grime on the windowsills, a layer of neglect that spoke to 3 years of a man doing only what was necessary to survive. She made supper. Caleb came in, ate, thanked her, and left. That night, Iris lay in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling and wondered if this was what the rest of her life would look like. A man who did not speak, a house that did not feel like a home, meals eaten in silence. She had expected practicality. She had not expected emptiness. On the third morning, Iris woke before dawn. She went downstairs, built up the fire in the stove, and started breakfast. Not the kind of breakfast she had been making, simple, functional, unremarkable, but the kind of breakfast her mother had taught her to make when Iris was a girl. She made biscuits from scratch with lard and buttermilk, light and flaky and golden. She fried eggs in bacon fat until the edges were crisp and the yolks were still soft. She made gravy, real gravy, thick and savory, the kind you poured over everything. She sliced apples from the root cellar and fried them with butter and cinnamon and a little sugar she found in the back of the cupboard. She brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. And she set it all on the table just as the sun started to break over the ridge. Caleb came in from the barn. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at the table. He looked at Iris. He said, "What is this?" Iris said, "Breakfast." He said, "I can see that. Why?" She said, "Because you need to eat." He said, "I have been eating." She said, "You have been surviving. That is not the same thing." He stared at her. Then he walked to the table and sat down. He looked at the food like he was trying to remember something. He picked up his fork. He took a bite of biscuit with gravy. He chewed slowly. He set down his fork. He picked up a piece of fried apple. He ate it. He took a drink of coffee. And then he put his elbows on the table and his face in his hands, and his shoulders started to shake. Iris stood at the stove, frozen. She did not know if he was laughing or crying or something in between. She did not know what to do. She did not know what she had done. Finally, she said, "Caleb?" He lifted his head. His eyes were wet. He said, "I forgot." She said, "Forgot what?" He said, "I forgot what it felt like to eat something that tasted like someone cared whether I lived or died. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. He said, "My wife used to make breakfast like this, every morning, for 14 years. And then she died, and I stopped eating breakfast, because every time I tried to make it myself, it just reminded me she was gone. So I ate whatever was easiest and fastest, and I told myself it did not matter, because I was the only one who had to eat it. And then you made this, and I—" He stopped. He looked at the table. He said, "I forgot that food could mean something." Iris said very quietly, "I am not trying to replace your wife." He said, "I know, but you just reminded me what it feels like to be cared for, and I did not realize how much I missed it until right now." Iris did not know what to say. She had made breakfast because it was what she knew how to do, because feeding people was the one skill she had that was undeniably useful, because in a house where no one spoke, food was the only language she could use to say, "I see you. You matter." She had not expected it to break something open. She had not expected him to cry. She said, "Do you want me to stop?" He looked at her like she had asked him to cut off his own hand. He said, "No, please, do not stop." After that, things changed. Caleb started coming in for breakfast. He did not say much, but he showed up. And Iris kept cooking. She made the kinds of meals her mother had made: pot roasts that fell apart under a fork, bread that steamed when you broke it open, pies made from dried fruit and careful rationing of sugar. She made soups that simmered all day and stews that filled the house with the smell of something good. She made food that said, "Someone lives here. Someone cares." Caleb started talking. Not a lot, but more. He told her about the ranch, where the water was, where the fences needed mending, which cattle were due to calve in the spring. He asked her if she needed anything from town. He started staying at the table after meals instead of disappearing immediately. He started noticing things. He noticed when she had washed the curtains that did not exist and made new ones from fabric she had brought with her. Simple muslin, nothing fancy, but they softened the windows and made the light come in gentler. He noticed when she had planted herbs in a box on the windowsill: rosemary, thyme, sage, so the kitchen smelled like growing things instead of just grease and smoke. He noticed when she had repaired his shirts, not just mended them, but reinforced the seams so they would last longer, replaced buttons that were hanging by threads, took in a shoulder seam that had stretched. One evening in mid-April, he came in and found her scrubbing the floor on her hands and knees. He said, "You do not have to do that." She looked up at him. She said, "The floor was dirty." He said, "It has been dirty for 3 years." She said, "And now it is not." She went back to scrubbing. He stood there watching her for a moment, then he went upstairs. When he came back down, he was carrying a rug, rolled up, dusty, clearly stored away. He said, "My wife made this. It has been in the loft since she died. I could not look at it. But if you are going to scrub the floor, you might as well put something on it." He unrolled it in front of the fireplace. It was beautiful, braided wool in shades of blue and cream and rust. Iris stood up. She wiped her hands on her apron. She said, "Thank you." He said, "She would want it to be used. She would want someone to care for it the way you are caring for this house." Then he walked out before Iris could see his face. That night, Iris sat on the rug in front of the fire and ran her hands over the braided wool. She thought about the woman who had made it, the woman whose room she slept in, the woman whose husband she had married. She thought about what it meant to live in someone else's ghost. And then she thought about Caleb bringing the rug down from the loft, about him saying she would want it to be used. And she realized that maybe the ghost was not a barrier. Maybe it was a bridge. The next morning, she made biscuits and gravy again. When Caleb sat down, she said, "Tell me about her, your first wife." He looked up, surprised. He said, "Why?" She said, "Because she lived here. Because her hands made this rug. Because if I am going to be your wife, I should know who came before me." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Her name was Margaret. We married young. I was 21, she was 19. She was small and quick, and she never stopped moving. She made this house feel alive. She sang while she cooked. She planted flowers everywhere. She laughed at things I did not think were funny until she laughed, and then they were." He paused. He said, "She died 3 years ago. Pneumonia. It was fast. She was sick on Monday. By Friday she was gone. And He stopped. He looked at his hands. He said, I did not know how to be alive after she died, so I stopped trying. Iris said, and now? He said, now I am trying again, because you are here, because you make breakfast, and it reminds me that life keeps going even when you do not want it to, because you scrub floors and plant herbs and fix my shirts, and it makes this house feel like a home again. He looked at her. He said, I cannot give you what I gave Margaret. I cannot be the man I was when I was 21, but I can be the man I am now, and that man is grateful you are here. Iris said, I am not her. He said, I know, and I am not asking you to be. I am asking you to be you. One evening in late April, after supper, he said, why did you answer my advertisement? Iris was washing dishes. She said, because I needed a home. He said, you could have found work. You could have married someone else. She said, I am 39 years old. I am fat. I am plain. No one was offering to marry me. Your advertisement was the only offer I had. He said, I did not offer. I stated terms. She said, that is still more than I had before. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I am sorry. She looked at him. She said, for what? He said, for making you feel like you had no choice, for bringing you here under false pretenses, for treating this like a business arrangement when you are a person who deserves better. She said, you were honest about what you wanted. That is more than most people are. He said, what I wanted was wrong. I wanted someone to cook and clean and ask nothing of me. I wanted someone who would let me stay dead inside. And then you made breakfast and I realized I do not want to be dead inside anymore. Iris dried her hands on her apron. She said, what do you want now? He said, I want to know you. I want to talk to you. I want to stop treating you like hired help and start treating you like my wife. He paused. He said, I want to build a life with you. Not just exist in the same house. Build something. She said, why? He said, because you care. Because you make food that tastes like love. Because you look at this broken-down ranch and you see something worth fixing. Because every morning you wake up and you make breakfast, and it reminds me that life is not just about surviving. It is about finding something worth living for. He looked at her. He said, and I think you might be that something. Iris felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. She said, you married me to save the ranch. He said, I did, but I want to stay married to you because you saved me. She said, I just made breakfast. He said, no, you did more than that. You made me remember what it felt like to come home to something warm. You made me remember that I am not just a man who works. I am a man who deserves to be cared for. And you made me want to care for someone again. You made me want to care for you. Iris looked at him, this big, quiet man who had married her out of necessity, and was now looking at her like she was the answer to a question he had not known he was asking. She said, I do not know how to be a wife, not a real wife. I only know how to cook and clean and keep a house. He said, that is enough. That is more than enough. You have been more of a wife to me in 2 months than I had any right to expect. And if you will let me, I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that you made the right choice when you answered my advertisement. She said, what if I did not make a choice? What if I just ran out of options? He said, then I will give you options. I will give you a home. I will give you safety. I will give you a life where you do not have to wonder if you are wanted, because you are wanted by me, not because I need someone to cook, because I need you. Iris did not know what to say. She had spent 39 years believing no one would ever say those words to her. And now here was this man, this big, broken, quiet man, saying them like they were the simplest truth in the world. She said, I am fat. He said, I know. She said, I am not beautiful. He said, you are to me. She said, why? He said, because beauty is not what someone looks like, it is what they do, and you do beautiful things. You make food that heals. You make a house into a home. You make me want to wake up in the morning. That is beautiful. She said, I do not know how to believe you. He said, then let me prove it to you, every day, for as long as you will let me. She said, how? He said, I will start by saying thank you. Thank you for answering my advertisement. Thank you for marrying me. Thank you for making breakfast. Thank you for staying. Thank you for caring when I had forgotten how to care about anything. He stood up. He crossed the room. He took her hands in his. He said, thank you for saving me. They stood there in the kitchen with the last light of the day coming through the window and the smell of supper still in the air, and Iris felt something in her chest crack open. Not break, open. Like a door that had been locked for 39 years finally being pushed wide. She said, you are welcome. He said, can I kiss you? She said, yes. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, gentle and careful, like she was something precious, and Iris, who had never been kissed by anyone, felt like maybe she had made the right choice after all. They had 21 years together. Caleb never went back to being the silent, hollow man who had picked her up at the stage depot. He talked. He laughed. He told Iris she had not replaced his first wife. She had given him a second chance at living, and he was grateful. They worked the ranch together. Caleb taught Iris how to mend fences and birth calves and read the weather. Iris taught Caleb how to make bread and grow a garden and turn a house into a home. They did not have children. Iris could not. Caleb said, "I do not need children. I need you." When Caleb died in 1917, Iris buried him on the ridge overlooking the ranch, next to his first wife. At the graveside, she said, "Thank you for seeing me." Then she went back to the house and kept living. She ran the ranch for another 14 years. When she died in 1931, the neighbors found her in the kitchen with flour on her hands and dough waiting to be shaped into biscuits. She had died doing what she loved, making breakfast for a man who was no longer there to eat it. They buried her beside Caleb. The headstone read, "She made breakfast. It changed everything." And every person who had known them said the same thing. Caleb Ward married Iris Bellamy to save his ranch. But in the end, she saved him. One breakfast at a time.